Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast series powered by openbusinesscouncil.org, citiesabc.com, and fashionabc.org. Once again, we are here to talk with world leaders, world experts, world inspiring personalities that are changing the world as we speak, but as well people that have an energy to take things out of their comfort zones, to go around the world, to speak with other people, and especially to do things. And that's what is this podcast series about: people that I admire, people that I like to profile. Some of them are my friends, which is the case of today. Others are people that I just found. But what we've been, I think the unique part here is that we are talking about positive narratives for the world and understanding the problems, looking at them and studying them and going where they are. Because a lot of the problems in the world is about lack of communication, lack of understanding of things that are happening, but as well about knowing what is happening in the right things. So today we're going to be talking about finance, about the book, and about the personality that is one of my best references in the world, especially when it comes to finance. And I'm saying this with all respect. So Emmanuel Daniel, that is an entrepreneur, writer, global thought leader, and now as well a global traveling personality, and as well one of the leading finance and I would say finance 360 experts, and as well, of course, the founder of the Asian Banker. It's the second time I have him in this podcast. The first was a fantastic one. I still recall the fantastic memory. So today you're going to be talking about his new book. Actually, it's not so new, but it's still new for most of the people probably listening to us. And it's a book that we deeply recommend. So the book is, it's called The Great Transition, The Personalisation of Finance is Here. And we'll talk about that. Just a small bio of Emmanuel Daniel. So Emmanuel is a Malaysian, Singapore-based entrepreneur. Normally, now he's based around the world in a plane and going and defining the world from the US to Latin America and a lot of places. As we speak, he's in Latin America. And is an entrepreneur, a writer, a global thought leader, and especially in finance, but as well in society trends. He's listed as one of the top 10 global influencers and thought leaders in Fintech Power50. And for me, he's effectively one of the people that know, because there's a lot of thought leaders that are mostly just doing good Twitter and good social media, but he's the one that really is one of the few people that can actually get 10 central banks in a room and speak with them and have a great relationship and go to China and go to Indonesia and Vietnam and keep people in the room, which is quite an impressive achievement, to say less. And as well, he's a trainer lawyer, has degrees from the University of Singapore and the University of London, and then attend a lot of studies from Columbia University, a lot of different things. His book, The Great Transition, The Personalisation of Finance is Here, was published in September 2022, and the book features the former Congressman Barney Frank, the author of the Dodd-Frank Act. Just that is a big achievement. The set of legislations that regulate, of course, the financial industry in the US today, and the Richard Sandler, an innovator widely regarded as the father of the financial futures. So Daniel is someone that can talk almost 360 about any area in the industry, but as well as founder of the Asian Banker. Create a platform that is not so well known probably as the Financial Times, but in Asia is much bigger than the Financial Times, and he organized some of the biggest conferences in the world. Around the world, it's not actually just Asia, although he's the Asian Banker, which is still a powerhouse in terms of the industry and the professionals in finance, but as well a personality that talks a lot of different things. So one of the things that about the book before we start is really for people listening to us, you can find the book. You can go to the website emmanueldaniel.com. And the book is available on Amazon, Google Books, Barnes & Noble, Amazon.co.uk, Books Repository, Waterstones, World Scientific, which is the publisher, which is actually the publisher of the novels of literature, the Swedish Academy novels. So it's actually quite impressive as well. So Daniel, welcome to our series. I could go for a long time, but this is about you.
Thank you very much, Dinis. I can reciprocate what you just said in introducing me, because you are a thought leader in your own right, and I've got great respect for everything that you've achieved. You work on projects in very specific countries around the world. In some of these countries, you are a pioneer who introduced them to the innovations taking place in finance today. And my conversations with you I update my own thinking on blockchain globally, and specific initiatives that are working and are not working, and I learn from you as well. The thing about my role in the industry, I draw from what people do in real life, and I think that I've got great respect in how you've created a business around helping governments, come to terms with all the innovations that are taking place in finance today. So I'm, even before this recording of this conversation, we already started exchanging notes, and there is a lot to be said between us. So just the jazzing between the two of us draws out so many issues that the rest of the world can learn from.
Well, amen, and thank you so much. It's an honor. So let's go straight away to your book, because I know that you've been traveling around the world, and there's a lot of things, but this is a very impressive book. There's a lot of topics that I think everyone should read, especially if people are in finance, but even if you're not in finance, because one of the challenges of society is the lack of understanding the tools of our times, and as well what is happening around us. Because I'm actually obsessed about 3 concepts that I would probably start as a provocation. Is the idea that we have so much digital tools that it become almost like a digital obesity and a digital laziness. And I think the challenge is that these tools are really changing society. And like your title says, the great transition, the personalization of finance is here. We have a big revolution going on in the financial industry. And I will just read a couple of things, and then I want your opinion. So the book outlines the transition that the financial industry is going through, and the concept of personalization of finance, and that uses the story to ice trade, the describe level what means personalization first of all, and how this is affecting institutions, markets, and society and societies, because there's a lot of, we cannot look at one society, we have a lot of different ones. And then you have the idea of financialization of everything, which is an interesting, I would like for you to go, and you have a lot of things about trends that are shaping personalization of society. And the book especially is useful for people that are founders, disruptors, and policymakers in finance, looking for original ideas on finance, economics, and this. And then the book is divided in a lot of topics that you're going to be highlighting. I will do a spin-off just about the book. And you have the book with you. You can show it as well, and you'll put it as well during the interview. Thank you, Daniel. So let's start by the concept of the personalization of finance and the financialization of everything. And as well, what's your vision for the book from your own mouth?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to describe this book. In fact, Barney Frank, the co-author of the Dodd-Frank Act, in the preface to the book, the first sentence he says is, "This is a difficult book." It is a difficult book in that it requires someone to sit back and look at all of the developments taking place and not take any one development as being more important than another, and looking for the underlying trend that all of us can pay attention to, that we can use to help us guide where the industry is heading. So you can actually switch off the television set, switch off, don't follow the media, and yet you will be keeping track with where the inevitability of the industry is, how it's evolving inevitably towards a certain conclusion. And the conclusion that I'm saying that is heading towards is personalization. In fact, the cover of the book has an image of an ice cube. So I use that, I start the book with that story, which is that if all of us remember, or all of us just stop to think about it, ice used to be something that was sawn out of the lakes, out of Boston and in Michigan in the old days, and put on horse-drawn carriages to faraway places like New York and even as far as Havana in Cuba and so on. And that's what ice used to be, and then eventually refrigeration came into the picture. And how do we get ice today? We manage our own ice, in the kitchen. We produce our ice when we want it. in the quantity that we want, and we use it for the purposes that we want. So what I'm saying is that the personalization of finance is similar to how the ICE trade evolved to the personalization of ICE. That is, it's well within our control today. The money that you have in your pocket might have actually gone swirled around the world before reaching you. It's subject to inflation, subject to the economy, it's subject to bank charges, subject to all kinds of risks. And when we think about what money is and what the global economy is today, it is well outside the control of any one individual. And the other thing the underlining theme that I'm spending time on building in the book is that it's not just finance that is in a journey. All of society is in a journey towards personalization. And I think that as we look at how entire economies increasingly focuses on the individual and empowers the individual, I think we are looking at how society as a whole is going to be organized going forward. I started writing this book maybe about 12 years ago, and in that time I was at the height of having been the founder of the Asian Banker. And as the founder of the Asian Banker, I had the privilege of being able to go into any number of countries. I can land at the airport in Seoul, in Korea, in Australia, in Philippines, in Dubai, and in the US. And I have the advantage of having the privilege of meeting some of the most important decision makers. And that's why I got Barney Frank, the co-author of the Dodd-Frank, write the preface to my book. But in the process, I understood a lot about what banking actually is. And the question I asked myself was, what about the DNA of traditional banking, the sustainable elements of traditional banking? What about it will be carried into the digital space? But then what I saw happening was that the industry was not just becoming digital, it was becoming decentralized as well. In other words, the whole premise on which finance is predicated, which is there is an intermediary in every transaction, that premise is starting to wither. It's starting to fall off at the sides at the moment. And then all the innovations taking place in decentralized finance, how much of that is real and how much of that will eventually replace banking as we know it to be, and what should traditional institutions do? Now, it was difficult for me to make that journey because what was happening in the industry was that all of the innovations taking place, the disruptors that were coming on stage, were looking like they were going to redefine finance, but because of regulation and because of the dominance of the legacy institutions, they were also absorbing the transitions taking place. So then the question is, where are we heading? And for that, I needed to go back into history and look at innovations in other forms that have taken place. I would actually go visit ICE houses, the ICE merchants' warehouses to remember what ICE used to be. It used to be a very respected industry in the middle of town, and the ICE merchants' warehouse was a very prominent building, and I've got photographs of that, as I travel. And then you take a city like New York. One of the institutions that, or rather one of the facades that fascinates me a lot about New York is Grand Central Station. In the 1950s, Grand Central Station was predicated to be the leading, railway hub for the United States. It was even renovated and made grand, and then what happened in the next 10 years was that suburban upstate New York, started to take shape. People started to have houses outside of the city, and the rise of the automobile and the rise of the aircraft industry, all of that stymied the development of the railway in New York. So I asked myself, how is it that entire industries can move in a certain direction, and then it is, it's stymied. It's actually distracted by other developments taking place. So when we look at finance today, it is heading in a certain direction, but there are all kinds of institutions and forces that are shaping where we are heading as a whole, and it's because of the difficulty of dealing with all of these forces. In fact, I tested my book by showing it to executives in Google, in Microsoft, and they looked back and they looked at the book and said, no, the changes you're talking about are not going to happen. And I had to absorb the importance of current large players, like platform players like Google and Microsoft, and how they will influence how we are organized as a society, and how finance itself will evolve going forward. So I just want to put that in perspective in my conversation with you, which I don't get a chance to say to other people, that writing a book of this nature and trying to predict or trying to map out how the industry will evolve eventually is a very, very intense process that requires you to take into account a lot of different factors. So this question that you've just asked, the personalization of finance, I've given you the description of it, which is think about the personalization of ICE, and that's how finance will eventually be personalized. And one of the difficulty I had in communicating that concept is that many bankers today think personalization means taking the products that they have, repackaging it, putting into a form that customers will love and be delighted. And it's about delighting the customer and making the customer feel gratified that the bank is thinking of him as a personal customer. And that's exactly what I'm not thinking about. In fact, what I'm saying to banks is that the product itself has to change in the personalization of finance. And finance is a intermediary industry. Nobody wants to have a mortgage. All of us want to have a home. Nobody wants to have an automobile loan. All of us want to have a sleek car. So it's a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. Now, what happens in the personalization of finance is that the individual is able to generate his own value and use that token or the value to interact with the rest of society, and also to participate in the network economy. And when the individual is able to do that, his perception of value changes, because his perception of value is not if something costs $100 and therefore I need to pay you $100. It's what can I generate in terms of value, and will it be accepted by the people I have interactions with? Now, the thing about cryptocurrency, and I try very hard not to use cliches. I don't use words like fintech very often. I don't use words like cryptocurrencies very often, and yet describe what's being created in finance today. So the thing about crypto is not that that Bitcoin, the value of Bitcoin went up to 65,000 and it's now floundering and so on. The value of crypto is that all of us can create our own crypto. You can, I can, anyone can, and that's been roughly what's been happening. It's like there are many different crypto being created around the world, and then they go through the process of being accepted by the users of the crypto for various reasons. Some cryptos have functionalities in them. Some cryptos are designed to give access to to the user to trade, to stake, to do things in decentralized finance. So just wrapping our mind around this concept that all of us can generate crypto, then the question is, why would we generate that? So I go back into areas in finance where the need to generate value has arisen. So I talk about community currencies, for example, and that's been, a development that has been very quietly taking place in different parts of the world in closed communities, where despite the existence of fiat currencies in Kenya, even in the US, I came across 5 community currency initiatives in small cities where the city, provides a coupon for work done, for value exchange between people in the little communities, so that the community can become increasingly more self-sustaining and recognize work where it's created in very destitute, circumstances. So now, and in Kenya, I came across a company, an organization called Saparu Credit, and they've created a very stable closed community, and then they put blockchain on it and digitize the creation of value. So there are many things that are true in traditional banking that are being carried into the digital space. And the thing is that I also then I make very important assertions that people don't need digital finance. They need digital access. They want to become part of the digital economy, and to deny a poor person or a person without resources access to the digital economy is to curse that person's life to be forever poor. So we should not be thinking about finance as being, oh, what that person needs is a bank account, for example. In fact, I'm saying to banks, I have an entire chapter saying that, if you are going to digitize the industry, you need to not fall in love with the products that you have. And the product that banks have that they are most in love with is the deposit product. And here, what I'm saying to banks is that give up your deposit product. And banks today cannot imagine themselves giving up the deposit product. And there I call on an allegory from the recent past, the story of Kodak, which is Kodak and other players during its time in 1995 practically invented the digital camera, and in the early 2000s, Sony popularized it and commercialized it, and then 2007, the iPhone came about, and it was so clear that the physical film was out of date. And yet, Kodak continued to be in love with its 35mm film and continued to sell that for many years, well into the 2000s, until it led to Kodak's bankruptcy in 2010. And what I'm saying to banks is that, for now, for example, there are lots of digital wallets of all kinds, crypto wallets, fiat currency wallets, wallets run by, non-banks, by telcos and so on, which enables the contributor to the wallet access into the community, access for usage and so on. And already the traditional bank deposit looks archaic, and it's even dysfunctional because banks don't give very good interest rates on their bank deposits. And I then say to banks that, you know what? Every bank in the world, I'm probably the first person saying this, and I hope it becomes a reality, is that every bank in the world should start thinking about issuing their own stable coin. Because when you think about how stable coins have evolved, especially in the US, where there's now regulation treating stable coins as a deposit-taking company that can be regulated by the OCC, for example, that stable coins and stable coins core proposition is not even the technology; it's the balance sheet, the ability to ensure that you have the balance sheet to support the valuation of the dollar or the cost of money on your stable coin, and banks are well placed to provide the infrastructure for such stable coins, which then the user uses to go and participate in all forms of digital economy. So I'm saying a lot of things in my book, and it also depends on how we take this conversation. But I'm going back to first principles in order to outline the transition that the finance industry is making. Now, the other thing I want to say is this, that in order to map the transition, I also had to take a view on how the technology platforms were evolving. So the thing I'm saying to the technology platform players is that that we are now in a transition from the platform economy to the personalization economy. So I'm not just talking to bankers, I'm actually also talking to the technology players and anyone who wants to put banking technology on a platform. And being persuasive in talking to technology players to get them to agree that there is a transition underway has been very difficult. In fact, when I talk to the technology players, the players who have aced the platform era, the Amazons, the Googles of the world, they are resisting the idea that we are in a transition to the personalization model. Now, so then I remind them, that Facebook between 2007 and 2010 was essentially a desktop networking platform. Facebook almost missed the transition towards mobile. In fact, it was 2010, literally at that point in time, and I was in China as this was happening. Was that Alibaba, Alipay, and WeChat were more mobile native and were able to build the platform economy on the mobile device better than the American players in the 2000s who were more desktop centric, and then as the mobile revolution evolved, many new players have come on board. And today we have TikTok, for example. And of course, the lifespan of these players gets shorter and shorter. I mean, you have Amazon, which is now essentially 1992, 2000. It's about 20 years old now, and I think that something like TikTok will have a shorter lifespan because even more new technologies such as the Internet of Things, virtual reality, will put pressure on the mobile device. That mobile itself is going through a transition into a new phenomenon which has to be device independent going forward. And as we become increasingly device independent, it means that the individual has data and has interactions not just on a device, but also on multiple devices that gives us a much more complete picture of the person's lifestyle, and economic needs. So I can keep going and build the iterations of my book, but let's take a question and build it from there.
Thank you so much, and there's a lot of things here, and I thank you. You got a very good summary of the different areas. So let's go to one area that I think is important for people listening to us. And in your book, you mentioned the story of ICE, and you mentioned as well the financialization of everything. There's as well the mass materialization of finance, which is a very interesting concept, and I think very important. And then you have one thing that is interesting, and I think you touch it partly, but I want to touch a bit more: history of innovation. So when you look at history of money, history of finance, it's all about iterations of innovation. So if you look at the 16th century, with especially the innovations that happened in Italy, there was the modern banking that was created, and the Medicis. Initially, the first bank created in the city close. I always forget the name of the city, close to Florence, and now, of course, it's just 400 years that we can talk about pure finance industry as we are part now. But we are right now, like you said, you touch crypto, you touch financial cooperatives. So there's a big right now fragmentation of what we see as finance, because in the end of the day, there's still in the 8 billion people in the planet, there's around 2 billion people that don't even have access to finance. And I know that at the moment you are in Latin America, and this as well. There's this central, this kind of. I always like to look at this in a kind of a context of history and context of numbers. So context of history, we have all humanity is 30,000 years, but only 500 years, less than 500 years of really pure industry organized on a global scale, or at least in a kind of some first globalization to the 20th century. And it's still very centralized in 3 or 4 locations. Most of the transactions in the world is New York, London, probably Hong Kong and Singapore right now, and then Switzerland and Luxembourg and a couple of other centers, but smaller. So if you look at this from the history of innovation, and it's a very complex question, but I know that you are a super mind. And the other part is, if you look at the areas of the numbers, that's a big paradox. The numbers is that the world economy GDP is around 70 to 80 trillion dollars. The securities and the trading parts of the world economy, it's out of control. There's numbers saying 700 trillion to over whatever we call it. And the debt is as well under control, out of control. So the debt of the world economy is probably bigger than even the securities. So we have just these numbers are very complex. And then what you just said about emerging markets and different communities around the world, we have from the 8 billion people, 2 billion people don't even have access to a conventional financial account. So that's, how do you see these numbers, especially in the context of your chapter, that is the history of innovation?
Let me put that in the context of the second question you were asking, which was the financialization of everything. So the global economy, I think this year should ace about $100 trillion, right? So we've reached that number, and we're reaching that number now. And I want to tie it into the digitization of everything. I think it was in 2014 that Jeff Immelt, the CEO of GE, made a claim saying that GE's core assets are no longer going to be the manufacturing that it does, but it will be the data that is produced from the manufacturing that it does. It's the data that's going to be the business of GE going forward. And I think that today we hear Tesla saying that, the Tesla automobile is a repository of incredible amount of data, like, in the hundreds of thousands of terabytes of data that is generated in one vehicle. And because everything can be digitized, they can be financialized. That's just very simple. It's the simple concept there. That is, anything that can be digitalized can be financialized. And what the financial system does is to go around the world looking for financial assets to trade. And because there's so much data being generated, what the global economy is going to be doing is going around looking for any type of data that can be traded and can be financialized. And we already see that happening today. In fact, the LIBOR crisis was a crisis of traders looking at indices created by bankers in order to trade them. And then there was a dichotomy. In fact, I have a small section on the LIBOR crisis saying that the LIBOR crisis wasn't a crisis of morality, it was a crisis of transition, which is the industry was in a transition from its institutional moorings towards markets, and that's another concept that I develop in the book, and I actually borrow from a historian and a thought leader in the 1990s. Now, because everything can be financialized, both traders and entire countries, economies can leverage on that trade, meaning that they can add debt to the trade. So what I'm saying also is that the way in which we calculate GDP is going to change. It's already changing, by the way. So the US, the statistics department in the US has made corrections to the way in which the GDP is measured in the US. It's no longer real economy activities only. It's also intangible assets like intellectual property, software, entertainment, and then the digital assets that are being generated today. So it's not inconceivable that the US GDP today is, I think, about $20 trillion, and it's not inconceivable that it will grow into $45 trillion, almost entirely on a financialized, economy, highly financialized economy. And the other thing that we need to recognize about the US economy is that US debt to economy now is $27 trillion. In other words, or 28, it might have actually gone up to 30 by now. Who cares? Because the ability of the country to issue debt. So this is something else I'm saying in the book, that debt is the economy. So let's stop worrying about that a country like the US can have inconceivable amounts of debt or unsustainable amounts of debt. Debt is the economy, and when you digitize, financialize, leverage, you create a whole new dimension in how value is created and the economy is grown. That we have to restate what an economy means going forward. And it will be the countries that, or the economies, they don't necessarily need to be countries, that are able to export the debt digitally, that will continue to dominate the global economy. Okay, and for those reasons, I actually think that the US will continue to dominate the global economy despite all of the distractions that we find from other stronger economies, forming around the world, because that's the direction of digitization taking us to financialization, and then the leverage of highly leveraged economies. Now, the thing about what can be digitized and financialized, we're going to spend the next 100 years testing and learning from many different assets. And here, actually, I borrow from Jared Diamond, who wrote this book, about how the history of the world evolved, and he mentioned in one of his books that humanity tried to tame just about every animal above 100 kilograms, but we only managed to tame 17 or 18 or something like that. We never tamed the lion and the tigers because they were too expensive. They were economically not viable. The animals themselves had a certain predisposition that didn't, make them amiable to humanity, stuff like that. So in the same way, we are going to go through a process of trying to financialize everything, and then discover that only some things can be financialized successfly, and many things will fail going forward. So that's what I mean by the financialization of everything. Okay. Now, related to that, the history of innovation, and when we start thinking about what works and what doesn't, I have had to take a view of the different forces that sometimes doesn't take us to where history suggests that we should go. So if you take nuclear reactors, for example, nuclear energy was an obvious future that we could have all gone into by now, if history had taken its course. But several things, distracted from nuclear energy becoming the dominant energy source today. One of it was the sheer incompetence of the engineering in nuclear energy, it just resulted in any number of nuclear fallouts in different parts of the world and so on. And second is regulation. Third is public perception, that there was a general perception in Western societies that, no, we don't want to go nuclear at all costs. So although the transition and the direction was so clear that nuclear could have been the future that all of us share today, we didn't take that route. And so when I look at a country like the US today, And in fact, one thing about traveling around the world, as I do and as you do, is that you start to see trends that are similar, regardless of countries being fundamentally different or being differently run. So the US, I find, is the one country where several institutions that are that dominate and define the country. So the state is an institution, large business is an institution, and in the US you also have ultra high net worth as an institution, which individuals who can shape society just in the same way that a state does in many other countries. And then, society as an institution, and then individual as an institution. You put them all next to each other. It is in the US where almost all of these institutions are in tension with each other. So it's in the US where the ultra high net worth can have as much influence in the direction of the use of technology, of how society is organized, as the state has. In many different countries, the state is so powerful that it doesn't allow individuals to have that influence. In other countries, the state is so dysfunctional that individuals actually have that kind of a role in that economy or the country. In the US is where the tension is most well developed. And it's a very, very difficult economy because of these tensions. And then we need to figure out how these tensions work against each other to create the future. So, for example, when I say that we are now moving from the platform economy to personalization, the large businesses are not going to allow that. In fact, large businesses always keep trying to recreate the intermediary function. Now, then I look at what thousands of people, thousands of ordinary people are doing in their daily lives that can counter that. Now, the interesting thing about the token economy is not the value of the token. The value of the token is a temporary distraction. What I also look at is how the technology is continuing to evolve. So the FTX episode, for example, what most people don't realize is that the hash rates of the trading in the core cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum continued to grow, and the more hash rates there is, the more secure and the more robust the crypto becomes, or the token becomes, and the more established the network effect becomes going forward. So the FTX episode did nothing to stop the progress of technology towards personalization, towards the network effect. So that is actually supported by the fact that if you take any token, Solana, Tezos, each one of them have got hundreds of thousands of programmers working around applications on each of these tokens. Like Solana, like 300,000 programmers working in an open source environment, creating applications around that. And no individual, no state, or no big business can push back on the forces of the energy of ordinary young people creating applications on tokens. So we have to take that into consideration as to how the future will evolve, eventually play out. And in developing these ideas, I'm saying to bankers that banks completely missed out on the on the open source revolution, on the API revolution, because when APIs as a model started appearing on the platform economy, bankers pushed back on APIs and said, we need to protect our data as if it's an internal asset, and that we had to reduce the API developers to become patch solution providers to our legacy infrastructure, and that's how APIs worked out in the banking industry. But when you look across the river and you look at how APIs were evolving in businesses like Microsoft, like Salesforce, Salesforce at one time had 50,000 API developers, now probably in the hundreds of thousands. And the gaming industry, where little children were able to build their own little games on the API platform. So and all of this is being carried into the blockchain world, where you need to give the freedom to the user to personalize, to create APIs that make sense to him. And the banking industry still doesn't get it. Still, is pushing back on that model. So I think I've just said a number of things there that need to be unpacked individually, but these are all trends that are affecting each other in that great march that I say that we're taking towards personalization.
Yeah, there's a lot of things there. So let's unplug a couple of them, because I want to touch, and of course my audience is very fintech and blockchain driven. So let's touch the areas that you mentioned related, especially with the cryptocurrencies and digital currencies. So in the drop of the ocean of finance is a very small ocean, although the noise is very big, because there's $4 trillion being done on Forex every day. For people listening, Forex is fiat transactions, so dollar, US dollar, and pound, euro, and so forth. And then the cryptocurrencies at its peak, they went close to 2 trillion. And now they are less than 1 trillion, around $800 billion, which is still a bit, but compared to the rest of the world, finance is nothing. But the noise that is making, it's massive. And like you said, there's two parts here. There's the evolution of digitalization of money, or at least of transactions and value, and special digitalization of data, because at the end of the day, a cryptocurrency is not different from a stock or from a reward system that you use when you go and pick a plane in Singapore Airlines or Emirates or British or whatever you call it. But the challenge here is that this is going very fast. Most of the governments don't have a clue. Like you said, most of the financial institutions, some of them actually spend millions building their own token, and then they put it somewhere because they're afraid. So there's a lot of fear of missing, but at the same time, there's I would say almost a cyberpunk scenario that we are living, and you are traveling around the world. So I want to touch that part. And I know that you did a lot of events in emerging economies that right now are becoming bigger than the world economies. So if you look at, if you just go back 10 years ago, China was a poor country. Now is the number one economy in the planet. And as well, it has more innovation than actually almost all the world economy. And I know that you're quite familiar with the Chinese economy and the Chinese financial world. So how do you see these different velocities? I think my question is that, and I know that you touch the book in a much more 360, but you touch a lot of things, and I want to touch. So because you, the velocity of something like crypto is that can actually, like you said, Solana and all these tokens are, for instance, just a paradox is the Sequoia Capital invests $500 million in, for instance, Polygon, and invests as well in Consensus that manage part of Ethereum. So this is no longer just one, it's the biggest VCs working with the big institutions, MasterCard is involved, but then if you go to a bank and you use crypto, you are blocked. So that's a big paradox here that doesn't make any sense. And at the same time, I can send $1 million in crypto to you, but I cannot send you probably $50,000 without going to my bank, go through 10 levels of cybersecurity, of compliance. And actually, most of these are done by junior people that really don't have any experience. So it's just pro-form. So that's, and then of course you go to emerging markets, and you mentioned Latin America experience with the crypto. Some countries are getting to that because they have nothing to lose. Let's put it that way. And as well, a lot of people as well. For instance, Nigeria is blocking the use of cryptocurrencies, but it's the biggest country in the world using cryptocurrencies. So that's a lot of fundamental, I would say, like guerrillas going on that are disrupting the global financial the global financial players and the global status quo of finance. And like you said, there's the debt as well, which in the end of the day, I have kind of a more psychological subject is for me is that if you have a debt, you have to pay it. And if you don't pay it, you're going to create a bubble that sometimes you will just bust. So it's a question of debt is then in the end of the day. And for instance, just that I'm putting a lot of things here on this is a more interaction in this one. But for instance, if you look at FTX, it's $40 billion. Okay. The UK government in the last, we are in 2022, for the people seeing this in the future, just destroys £60 billion with a ultra-liberal experiment with the Prime Minister and Chancellor that mostly non-elected destroy 60 billion pounds of the British economy. So this is actually much bigger and much more impactful, because at least FTX was a mismanagement of business, but right now everyone is afraid of crypto, which doesn't make any sense. So we have this, it's mostly about the perception. So the financial industry, as we financialize everything, which I love your concept, it creates as well a kind of a complex gorilla that never exists in financial history, because you had always like different currencies from country to country. You had gold, you had coins, you had silver, you had a lot of crises, but it was not in the space of time so fast. Now the thing is, the velocity is happening in months. In a month, for instance, a token can go worth. For instance, I was involved in projects that a token that start from nothing in the space of 3 months went to valuation of $800 million. And even me, I got scared. It was not my project, but I was advising. I was, no, come on, guys. And of course, in the space of another month, it disappeared. So the kind of these bubbles and this kind of innovation as well, because at the end of the day, these people are not scammers. There's a lot of scammers, but there's a lot of scammers in dollars as well. Okay, the people say that there's a much more percentage of cocaine in the US dollars than anything else. So how do you see this kind of paradox that we have right now? And this is creating as well a psychological effect, because then people get a bit of cynicism around financial institutions, and they will go in terms of conspiracy theories, and this can create actually a massive chaotic situation in the next decades, because with AI coming to the part as well, this is going just to become more complex. Sorry, it's a big question, but you are a big questions man. So I think I would like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, just before I answer the question, the interesting thing is that, and I learned this when I was much younger, right? Which is that when you owe the bank $1 million, you are in deep trouble. But if you owe the bank $100 billion, the bank is in trouble, right? So
it's a good one. I love that.
Yeah, and so it is in the global economy. When you're a small country that can't pay your bills, you're in trouble. But if you're the largest country in the world and you can't pay the bills, the world is in trouble. So and that's how I think that is the economy will evolve, which is those who can will, and those who can't won't. In my book, the first 2 chapters, I build into a conceptual framework around ICE, for example, and then I talk about personalization. He who controls identity. I talk about identity, and I said he who controls identity controls the economy, and stuff like that. Right now, then in the middle part of the book, I actually struggle a lot with what banking actually is and the essence of the industry that will get carried into the personalization phase. And in the last part of the book, I then look around for intellectual maps that can help us guide us through all the activities that you just described. There's so much happening. We just need a framework to understand what it is that we're dealing with. So I borrowed an idea from a RAND Corporation, researcher, David Ronfeld, who wrote a paper in 1994 suggesting that society as a whole goes through 4 transitions. It goes through from its tribal origins to its institutional phase, and then it goes to its markets phase, and then network phase. And he talked about the network phase in 1994, when the most developed technology was the fax machine. And yet he was able to see how the network economy will evolve going forward. So when I take an asset like cryptocurrency, for example, I ask myself, what is it that I'm dealing with? So crypto assets as a trading asset, as a security, belongs firmly to the markets phase of human or social evolution, and everything that that Charlie Munger or any of the sages in trading will tell you are true. Okay, that it is a security. It goes up and down with the economy, with inflation, with the rate of funds, and trade between different countries, and so on. And all that these sages in trading on the stock exchange tell you about what cryptocurrencies actually represent are true, and you have to pay attention to what they're saying. But what they're not familiar with is the applications and the utility of crypto in the network phase that we are now slowly transitioning into. When the network phase is fully developed, the true value of crypto will become commonplace. It becomes so commonplace that we will not be talking about the price of crypto anymore. We will be talking about the utility of crypto, in the network phase. So if we frame ourselves into what is it where are we now in the evolution of the economy, and what is this that we're dealing with, then we can be much clearer of what the issues are in that phase. So crypto as a tangible security that is traded on a willing buyer, willing seller basis, that's market economy. When you sell me a crypto, you need to sell it at the highest possible price. I have to make sure that I buy it at the most valuable price that I think is worth paying that money. You get a profit, I get a value, and then I transmit it to the next person. That's a market economy concept. But crypto in the network world is totally different. And we are transitioning there. Now, crypto in the network world is a piece of information, and information is the one asset that actually grows in value the more you distribute it. In other words, I become more powerful if a piece of information I put out into the network is used in the network, and is proliferated in the network. And the beauty of information as an asset is that the person who gives it away doesn't lose it, and the person who gains it will need to give it away to realize the value of that transition. And that's totally different from the market's economy, where it's a willing buyer, willing seller type of a model. So I use this framework to guide me in what I'm actually dealing with. And all of the elements. So when you look at hash rate in crypto, you're not looking at the value of crypto, or the tradable value of crypto. They talk to completely two different elements or dimensions. We all don't need to get caught in the daily shenanigans that are evolving of bad actors, and distractions in terms of valuations and so on that's taking place today. If we have a guide as to where this is heading, and then the forces that can change that or influence that in one way or another. The interesting thing about intermediaries and the role of intermediaries is that at the beginning of the crypto economy and the beginning of the decentralized finance economy, the only way that individuals could get funding was to organize themselves as intermediaries. But the intermediary world is transitioning so fast, so quickly. At one time, you wanted to be an exchange to provide the platform for players to transact, and then you say, exchanges today are passé. They're not successful, or they're not entirely profitable anymore. Why? Because individuals are gaining more control over their tokens, and even where they can store them, where they can trade them, and so on. And then exchanges started calling themselves custodians, and then they are morphing into new types of intermediaries in order to be able to function. So I think that the whole intermediary game is evolving, and the holy grail of intermediary is the intermediary of identities. And today in order for me as a physical person to exist in the digital world, I need the help of an intermediary to validate me. But going forward, well into the future, I'm validated by the other participants in the in the network. So the more visible I am on the network, the more validated I am. And then it creates other problems, which is in the network world, I can have multiple identities, which I cannot really have in the markets world. And then it creates other problems in the future. So just by siloing or by structuring which phase of the evolution we are in, I'm able to to describe what the issues are in that phase. And I think that that's as much as we can do, because the forces that are trying to shape the future of the industry, they are very complex and they are very powerful, each one of them. And today, the big thing is that the individual is also a powerful force in the evolution of finance. In the future of decentralized finance, I'd say this, that today, decentralized finance seems to be in the realm of the geeks, because you almost have to be a technology person to understand how everything works and why they work the way they do, and even do a little bit of coding in order to create your own little application to interact with others on the network. So as that, as the technology intensive nature of decentralized finance becomes increasingly user-defined, I think that ordinary people will understand it more. So that's one of the difficulties taking place in decentralized finance. The other difficulty taking place in decentralized finance is that everything that's happening in decentralized finance is being explained using traditional banking terms. Oh, this is staking, this is borrowing, this is leveraging, this is lending. Those are traditional banking terminologies. What's actually being created in decentralized finance is I need value. I need to transmit value to someone else. I need to generate an income. We need to find new language to describe what's actually happening in decentralized finance. And a lot of what's happening in decentralized finance is actually designed to support the lifestyle needs of the individual, of the user, of the crypto or the asset or the person doing the transaction. And so just, to keep it simple for ordinary people, I'm saying this, that it's not inconceivable that we will arrive at a day where I may be sitting in a restaurant and I want to pay for my bill and I want to borrow money from the people around in the restaurant. I can send out a message saying, is there anyone in this neighborhood that would like to lend me money? And all my so-called counterparties or the other individuals in my vicinity can look at me digitally and say, do I want to give him the money to pay for his bill? And they will have to go through a process of validating my identity, verifying my credit profile, and telling me whether they want to connect with me. We can all do that in the future without the need of a financial intermediary. Now, the struggle with understanding how intermediaries will evolve, I went back into history, and Adam Smith said that society doesn't need intermediaries, that all of society can be organized around small businesses interacting with each other. It's the most efficient model. But the reason why we ended up creating huge businesses was, and there was another intellectual, Ronald Coase, who in the early 1990s, 1900s, came up with this idea that the reason we intermediaries became an important function of the economy was because there was asymmetry of information between players. So if you're a small business owner, You don't know, what value you could derive from the production of your goods and services. You don't know what the cost of labor is in the marketplace, and so on. It was the larger businesses that were able to aggregate information and then utilize them. But today we are arriving at a point where there's greater symmetry of information, which is the information the large business has, I have. The symmetry of information that is the supplier has, that the user has as well. So the access of the information is not where the problem is. It's the intention of what you want to do with the information that needs to be determined. So we are actually arriving at a time in history where the ordinary user of information has as much information as the supplier of information. And how that will evolve will remain to be seen.
Yeah, it's a lot of questions there, and how we're going to be managing all the complexity. I think my main concern is this complexity, like you said, that you need to know about using code to understand a lot of these things. And at the same time, you have emerging markets going very fast. And actually, there's, like you said, the challenge right now is that you have a narrative that is very broken in terms of what means financial industry. But let's keep in your book, because we're not going to answer all these questions, and I want to be cautious of your time. I know that this is a good one for us to keep here. So there's, and actually, by the way, in the website of Emmanuel, there's a fantastic organization of the book. There's quotes from personalities like Dodd-Frank. And I'll read the quote of Dodd-Frank because it's interesting for people listening to us. This is a tough book in the best sense of that word. Readers should be prepared to pay serious attention to complex issues of fundamental social and economical importance. Unlike many whose familiarity with a particular status quo induces a sense of comfort in their thinking about the subject, Emmanuel Daniel builds on his lifelong study of the financial system, not to just confront the hardest questions that have been raised about it since the crisis of 2008, but to formulate newer and more profounder ones. He has for decades been a trusted source of expertise about banking in its most expansive definition. So that's a fantastic compliment from Barney Frank, of course, the author of the Dodd-Frank Act and a lot of other things. But let's look at this experience. So I think we spoke right now in big topics. Let's right now go to your experience going through countries, organizing events with the biggest banks in the world, organizing banks. I was in one of your events as a keynote before or after the Central Bank of Vietnam, which is one of the fast-growing companies, actually, just a couple of years ago, and of course one of the fast-growing as well innovation companies in the world, with all the challenge of the economy, and the same with the Indonesia and so forth. So we have a unique experience from emerging markets to Singapore, where we are based, at least official, when you're not traveling.
I'll say that.
How do you see this? I used to be.
New York. In fact, this year I've spent nearly 6 months in New York. The last 2 years I was living in Beijing. Coming from Singapore is no longer an important description of me. And I like the idea that I spend time in totally different ecosystems, because that gives me a feel of the essence of the ecosystems. I'm not a big fan of geopolitics, because when you talk about countries and economies from a grandstanding perspective, you just totally miss the real story of each of the economies and how they're developing. In fact, this year, spending a lot more time in the US, I've come to appreciate, understand where the US is in the future of finance. It's got probably the most developed legacy infrastructure that it needs to dismantle. And the US is always seen as a laggard in the very technologies that it develops, because it always develops an incredible amount of legacy infrastructure, and dominant aggressive institutional players who are very profit-centric and very capital-intensive, and they build huge working models that need to be dismantled if a new innovation comes into play. And the incumbents always resist the new innovations. They try to block new players and so on. And a new economy, whether it's China or something in Africa, where they don't have a dominant player yet, will find it much easier to scale up on an economy in the early years. But always the US comes back because its access to capital is second to none, and the willingness to destroy old capital to create new capital is most developed in the US more than any other economy. So in many things, and we saw this in the mobile phone evolution, for many years I was seeing innovations in countries like Japan and Europe, the GSM and so on. And then finally when the US is able to encapsulate that development with the launch of both the Google and the iPhone, it re-dominated the entire digital space on the mobile device. And in the same way, it is a super laggard, but there will come a point where there will be inflection points in the US where the US will assert its leadership again. In banking, for example, I'm looking forward to introduction of FedNow next year. And that's the US equivalent of instant pay, which is highly developed in many other parts of the world, in the UK, in Europe, in parts of Asia. Instant payment is today normal daily life, and the banks in the US are resisting instant pay because that's what differentiates different players, that the dominance in the different parts of the country. But once you have instant pay, it puts the small players on par with the big players. In other words, if your bank account is with a small bank, you have just the same amount of digital access as a customer of a big bank. And the other thing it does is that it then refocuses payments into the platform aspect of payments, the community aspect, the usage, rather than just making a payment. Today, payments in the US, you have Venmo, which is built as a tag on to the legacy banking infrastructure, which is incredibly slow, it's highly limited, and so on. But once you have FedNow, it changes. But then I also see, and this comes from traveling to many countries, that banks in general, in many countries, whether it's in the US, in the UK, in Singapore, in China, they resist these transitions as far as they can, because in the traditional intermediary model, banks make money from the float and from the inefficiency, not from the efficiency. So we will see that kind of a pushback in the US system until they cannot push back, either because the regulator pushes them on, or technology creates a new player that aces everybody else. So I think that on a macro level, how countries evolve are also issues that we need to see as to where innovation will come from and will drive. The Africans have figured out that payments is simply a messaging between two devices, and that's a technological innovation that is already in place. And the Africans are the first to embrace it and to internationalize it and to scale it up to multi-country levels. And then that innovation will come back to the developed economies like the US and Europe.
So, and do you really think that? So, I think the question or the elephant in the room is how these technologies can actually create a narrative across the board that can leapfrog humanity. Because the challenge is that, like you said, there's the legacy systems, there's countries that can leapfrog because they have enough money or innovation capacity, but we still have the elephant in the room that most of the world population is still going and struggling. Of course, we are better than ever, but the perception is not good. From a macro analytics or from a data perspective, humanity is better, but from the experience, it's there's a negative experience. There is a lot of different things. So I know that there's a lot of things we've been talking here for people listening to us. So please, I recommend emmanueldaniel.com/the-great-transition, and please buy the book if you can. And there's a lot of things here. So let's look at, you have a lot of different chapters here. Let's look at the chapter that you touch cryptocurrencies, but let's look at what you have here. It's the blockchain killed in the back office. Or blockchain killed in the back office. Sorry, I want to be careful about the way I say it. So can you highlight this part, because you touched the CBD, so the central bank digital currencies, and you spoke as well about cryptocurrencies. But just in general, to the blockchain general part, not just the crypto CBDCs, because there's much more that is just that.
There are a number of phrases which truisms today that people use without thinking, and even incorporate into corporate strategy, which to me are lies. Okay, I also say that financial inclusion is a lie, because I'm saying that the whole idea of financial inclusion is driven by the venture capitalists who want to create platforms in finance to onboard millions of users or customers and then monetize them, right? So the idea is to monetize the millions of new users that you onboard onto platforms. So it's a platform economy catchphrase, financial inclusion. And there are very few financial inclusion projects that actually generates value to the local community. And here, what I do is I go back to the projects that are working. So if you want to talk about financial inclusion, you go to a country like Bangladesh, which it pioneered microfinance, and microfinance was all about bringing groups of women, 6 women in a small group, and then lending to them for very specific purposes. And then if you want to digitize it, you can figure out how to add the digital element, and that's far more sustainable than the Indian model, where where microfinance was financed by venture capitalists, lending to men in their transition from the village to the city. They are itinerant workers who lived in the slums, which were not stable environments. And you have multiple, venture capital-driven lenders creating microfinance institutions. And it was so bad that in the year 2010, a state like Andhra Pradesh banned microfinance because there were lots of suicide and a lot of stress in the economy as a result. So I'm not a fan of catchphrases that everybody thinks that they understand, but actually when you start to think what it actually involves, you realize that that there are issues in there. So what you just asked me, which has to do with blockchain, what I'm saying is this, that banks are not the natural champions of blockchain, because no matter how much blockchain a bank uses, it is always limited by how much the compliance department will allow them to use, or to scale. So a blockchain transaction for $100,000, no problem. We can do it as a pilot. But a blockchain transaction for $100 million, the entire compliance department comes into the picture, and they kill it, because they want to be involved in manually validating the transactions. And then you hear bankers say things like, I believe in permissioned blockchain, but not permissionless blockchain. I believe in blockchain, but I don't believe in crypto. So the banking community thinks that it's able to believe in what they want to, or to pick and choose the elements of the technology that works, that preserves their existing model of how they conduct transactions, and that has to give way. There are banks that are saying that we need to start embracing the permissionless model and be able to enable customers who are not our customers, or other participants who are not our customers, to participate in a blockchain transaction. There are a few that are saying that, but there are no intermediary driven blockchain initiatives in banking at all anywhere in the world today.
You think so?
Yep, not a single one. Every one of them, firstly, the participants have to be a customer of the bank. That already throws out permissionless, throws it out of the window. So they are actually pre-qualified to be participants in a blockchain transaction. Then, which then begs the question: why do it on a blockchain when the participants are known to each other? I mean, what's the purpose of having a shared ledger? What value does that transaction bring into the workflow? And then what I'm saying, and as you correctly, there's a section in my book where I said blockchain killed in the back office, which is the compliance department and the risk department will not allow transactions through. The banking industry has gone through so many fraudulent transactions and bad actors within the institution. Everyone from Nick Leeson in the 1990s to, every year there is a big blow up. Almost every year there's a big blow up in some kind of a trade or a transaction in banking. And the compliance department has become larger. In fact, one of the best paid jobs in banking is compliance risk management. So these people are not going to allow intermediary-free transaction platform. Just as simple as that. Then what happens is technology will overtake them, and what happens in DeFi will define what's possible, and the industry will need to look at that and say, you know what, we have to give up our idea of permission transactions.
Well, that's a very good point, actually, and it makes sense because effectively, but that is as well, these people are just killing themselves. It's the problem right now is that, but this just creates as well a lack of understanding of what is happening, because if you ignore innovation and if you ignore these things, you are just putting yourself in a spot. But well, it's a much bigger conversation that is a key L1 here. So I think we are in almost 2 hours, so it's great. I will probably finish in a while because you can go for a couple more hours, which is great. If I see there's some podcasts they go to 4 hours, but I think 2 hours is a good one, and we'll divide in pieces for the one. So one of the chapters you have is the next financial crisis. Okay, and I'll just take a bit of parts from the book. Americans have way of framing every major event in the context of a similar event in the past, as they do in the sports. The best score inning since the Red Sox against the Tigers, this is quoting you, in 1953, is used in finance to describe the worst banking crisis since the Great Depression. So it's obvious that these bubbles will have consequences. We're already getting a lot of consequences, but at the moment, what I'm seeing is more and more small events happening very fast, and they affected an entire country, like the £6 billion that we mentioned before in the UK economy in November 2022. But how do you see this in a world scale? Because the challenge here right now is, if I look at history, I see two civilization moments. Is that you look at the Roman Empire, that mostly eclipsed internal, mostly because of corruption and lack of innovation, and it was actually taken by the kind of the Nordics that at the time were actually the Vikings and all these different things. And then it gave origin to the Middle Age, which was not a dark period as the history sometimes portrayed, but actually there was a lot of innovation as well, but really changed quite systemic. I think the challenge right now, and then my question is still about the next depression or the next financial crisis, is that we have right now a big, I would say not an elephant, but here is a dinosaur in the room, that is the AI. So AI, and it's an area that you don't have a chapter about this, you have a lot of different things, but I want to touch this because it's particularly important, and I think especially developers in the last couple of months, especially right now with the open AI GDP, I always forget the name. I'll try to spell it right because I'm using it myself. The GPT, the Chat GPT, is making a massive revolution, because even me as a writer, I'm testing, and I wrote 30 to 40 pages using the OpenAI, and the quality, it's astonishing. So that means people, professionals like you and me, our teams, or they use these tools or they'll get out of market. So this is kind of another level that will be, and of course, one thing we've been doing actually on the technology side of some of my companies is building AI that is starting to scare me. So we can actually go and digitize an entire, just picking data available and start predicting economic issues in one economy or stuff like that. So this is going to have, and as well, sorry, I'm putting another element of complication, is that if you go as well, most of the trading systems in the world is already managed by AI bots. I would say more complex algorithms, but all the trading hedge funds, all the trading world is 70 to 80, the numbers change, probably 90% is managed by machines and supercomputers and algorithms. So how do you see all of this? Because it's really, this of course is the elite, but this is big amounts of money, actually the biggest of the part of the world economy. Most of the $1 trillion daily transactions on Forex are done by machines as well, the banks and so forth. But then there's all the things we've been talking about. So how do you see this in the context of the potential financial crisis? Because this can leapfrog fantastic innovation or can actually create a massive crash.
So, Dinis, you've actually described everything that I was going to, that I would have.
No, there's a lot of innuendos. Yeah.
Respond to you. So the first thing you've said is that the American way of looking at the inevitable course of history is actually fractured, it's wrong. The Americans have a way of saying that, oh, this is the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. That phrase actually comes from the sports language, where that was the best inning since the 1950 Red Sox inning. That was the best play since the 1923 player and stuff like that. They keep going back to a previous reference to create context. But the way in which human society evolves is that there's a transitionary evolving process, and each phase that doesn't have a reference to the previous phase. So in banking, for example, if you look at the balance sheet of a traditional bank in 1984, at the time of the savings and loan crisis, the balance sheet of a traditional American bank had a strong mortgage element of more than 60% of the book is actual mortgages is set on the book. By the time we reached 1989, after the securities crisis, the stock market crisis, you start seeing that banks were starting to have increasing number of securities on their balance sheet, trading securities. In fact, that's how the Basel regime also evolved, which is Basel I was 8% against against your balance sheet, and then Basel II started recognizing the increasing role of markets in the balance sheet, and then you had 3 pillars, and then you had IRB, internal ratings, because it was becoming impossible for the regulator to assess the value of the assets in a bank's book, because increasingly they were becoming more ephemeral, meaning that they were not based on any underlying assets. In fact, the assets that the banks generate, they actually cobble them together and they sold them out into the market. So they had less and less of actual assets sitting on their books. Today, as you pointed out earlier in our conversation, the trading assets of a bank is unimaginable. In fact, in many banks, the CEO doesn't even know how much securities or how much derivatives he else has on his balance sheet. And sometimes it's the journalist who discovers or suggests a number, and then the bank has to go in response to try and damage control mode. So what I'm saying is that the balance sheet of an average bank and the balance sheet of a large corporation is increasingly ephemeral. It's increasingly not about the underlying asset or the core business. It's about the securities that they hold, the cash that they hold, and the investments that they make. And today, large corporations in the US also include cryptocurrencies into their portfolio mix, so that they look less of the actual business that they are, and more of a trading platform. So going forward, the next financial crisis will be even more ephemeral than the 2007 and 2008 trading crisis. It's going to be based on intangible, even more intangible assets that we faced in the 2008 crisis. So if the 1984 crisis was about assets and liabilities on actual assets, the 2008 crisis was about the trading book on derivatives of derivatives, and the 2030 crisis or something of that sort will be on even more intangible assets that the banks cannot value against actual underlying assets anymore. It's just as simple as that. And what that means is that perception of value becomes even more important than underlying value. Even in the Eurozone area, Greece was like less than 10% of the GDP of the whole Euro region, but it was perceived as being the ledge that could potentially destroy the Eurozone, although Spain and Portugal and the UK had more debts on their book than Greece, and they were seen to be far more stable economies. So perception will play an increasingly more important role, and managing perception becomes incredibly important, regardless of the profile of your balance sheet. Whether it's a large balance sheet or a highly leveraged balance sheet, and so on. In fact, if you take the FTX episode, the fact that he was able to raise so much capital so quickly and then leverage it to like $40 billion was entirely driven by perception rather than any underlying assets. And so you will have blow-ups like this on a continuing basis going into the future. And when you look into the balance sheet, there's no underlying assets at all. And so the operating mechanism is not about assets and liabilities or the balance sheet. It's increasingly ephemeral, something as something as intangible as perception.
Yeah, it's a complex part of I think, like you said, is the perception that is the key thing, and the narrative. Perception and narrative are probably the biggest shifts that we have right now when it comes to society. So I know that we passed 2 hours. Any last thoughts that you want to touch on this? I think for wrap up, and I think we'll have a second round, but for the second round, I'll bring 3 or 4 people. Let's do a live. So I think it'll be interesting to handle this.
I think the best way to unpack the book and the ideas that are in the book is to have a conversation between 3 or 4 people, because I think the book needs to be tested. And I love it to be tested because I'm making fundamental perception or assertions about first principles, not about anything specifically that's taking place in society today. Now, I actually end the book by saying that all of society is heading towards personalization, and because of that, the importance of the individual is growing so profoundly that holding society together is becoming a big issue. And personalization doesn't mean that the world will become a better place. In fact, I'm saying that narcissism will be perfected even more in a highly personalized ecosystem, of which finance will be at the very core, driving the ecosystem. So even as you read my book, the questions that we should be asking is, how should society itself be organized? going forward. In fact, as I was writing the book, that was the conclusion that I was coming to. And I hope that anyone who's reading the book would think the same way.
Fantastic. And I think like you said, it's all about the way we look at concepts and create narrative. And well, first of all, congratulations for the massive achievement that you did here. And as well, all your work. We didn't talk about your trips that you do around the world. You touched that, but that's a lot of things. You're traveling for a lot of countries, speak with governments. So I will just synthesize, because we've been going for 2 hours. The Great Transition, the Personalization of Finance is here. The book was published on the Friday, 30th of September 2022, so it's still a fresh book. And please read it. Try to question, try to think, and let's all discuss this. You can actually engage here on this, where you're listening to this, or YouTube or other podcasts, but go to the website, engage as well with Daniel. He's a fantastic, generous person as well, and a lot of things on his intellectual mind, but as well the way he dedicates time to discuss the world problems and as well finding solutions for people. So Daniel, it's been an honor again to have you here, and definitely we have a series that we're going to come back again to another one. Thank you so much.
Dinis, always enjoy my conversations with you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to lay out the book in the way that it flowed in my mind. This was an incredible conversation. Thank you very much.
Amen, and thank you so much. It's been an honor.